Yeah, we are live, so
Okay,
you can start, Elisa.
thank you. So welcome everyone, and welcome to our Product People community event. We will be live on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitch, and you can always join us on Zoom. Today, we will be talking about how can we test this tomorrow, a guide by the head of product at Blinkist. But first of talking with Eveline, let me introduce myself. I am Elisa Cantamessa, an associate product manager at Product People. I joined Product People in February as an intern, and I've been with them since then. What we do at Product People, we do not only host event, but we are also an interim product manager company that we help companies to fill the gap for between 3 to 36 months when maybe some of your colleagues is on maternity leave or you have a new team and want to start focusing on a new discovery project. But first of all, also thank you for all of you here today, because you are allowing us to make this community grow and become bigger and share the knowledge of product management. As you can see, those are some of our clients. Who is in Berlin may recognize some of them more easily because we are legally based in Berlin. But let me introduce today's host, Eveline. She's the head of product management at Blinkist, and she will talk about a guide to testing. Eveline, I will now stop sharing my screen and let you go.
Yeah, thank you, Elisa. Sorry, I'm just getting my screen set up. Here we go. So yeah, just maybe quick word about myself, or that girl in the photo with the bangs and the 5-year-old phone. Very old photo. It's a promo photo of Blinkist, and it is actually quite old because I've been at Blinkist for quite a while already. So I've been here for 5 years already, 9 years as a product manager overall. When I started at Blinkist, I've been more of an all-rounder because I was the first product manager here. So I've really seen the company grow a lot. During the majority of my time at Blinkist, I've been focusing on conversion rate optimization and growth. This is still very much my passion topic. So if you want to connect and talk about growth, I'm definitely up for it. But now I transition into the role as head of product management, and yeah, will now also introduce Blinkist to those of you who may not know the company. So we're a subscription app, and what we do is condense nonfiction books and podcasts into formats that you can understand in 15 minutes. So instead of having to go through a 3-hour podcast or a 6-hour nonfiction title, with Blinkist, you can read or listen to the key insights in just 15 minutes and really understand those powerful ideas. Now, let's talk about how we can test this tomorrow. So this question is a super important question, one that we really internalized at Blinkist. And if you think about testing something, what you want to do is create certainty for your idea, for your hypothesis, for your assumption. And usually what happens is, to create like a higher level of certainty, you have to go to a higher level of real world environment, real life environment. So if you really want to have full certainty, usually you would have to like launch an MVP, put it into the product, measure basically your success metrics, and then you know for sure if something is right or not and something works or not. But what I want to do now in this presentation is present some questions that we ask ourselves and some tools that we use to really find ways of testing hypotheses and ideas with a high level of certainty, but not really fully fledged features yet. So how can we actually test this tomorrow? I would suggest you start by asking yourself 4 questions, and I will introduce those 4 questions and give examples from Blinkist of how that works for us. So first one, very obvious one, seemingly, can we see this in the data? It doesn't seem like a revolutionary idea, but I think the one takeaway I want you to take is you have to ask this regularly with every idea, with every assumption. Don't just take it, but actually ask yourself this first question: can we see this in the data? So one example that is quite recent from Blinkist is a hypothesis around users that skip our onboarding. So if you download Blinkist today, you will see there's a typical onboarding where we ask, what are your interests? What do you like, etc. But of course, there's a lot of users who skip the onboarding. For us, it's actually a huge portion of users, 40%. Now, what we also saw already with these users is that they just don't start the trial. We're a subscription app. They have a 7-day trial. The first step to activating our users is getting them into the trial. And those users who skip, they just don't do it. Hypothesis was that, maybe they are just low intent users. Maybe they are just these adjacent audiences, not necessarily our target audience. Maybe there's not much that we can do. We asked ourselves, can we see this in the data? So we started analyzing the user journeys that they take once they skip the onboarding. And it turned out they have, compared to other segments, the highest rate of searching for content, the highest rate of browsing, the highest rate of going beyond the home screen. That doesn't sound like they have low intent. They actually have big intent. So it must be something else. So we could confidently already say this hypothesis is not confirmed. And now we're actually exploring further in that direction. Now, the second question we always ask ourselves, can we remote test this? So there's a lot of tools out there now where you can just create prototypes, upload them, and have testers really usability test your ideas immediately. I want to give one example from Blinkist today, which I'm really proud of because it really reduced our time to learning immensely. So I remember we were sitting in the backlog refinement and we discussed a certain user problem that users who signed up on our website and then download the app, they do not log in. Instead, they go through the onboarding again and then they have to create the account again, but then they have 2 accounts and that's a big problem. So the problem was they just didn't find the login button. Now, if you look at our welcome screen in the app, you kind of see why. You see these 2 options on the welcome screen, get started, which is basically the, start with the app when, if you don't have an account yet and it's green and it screams in your face, get started, it's a cool CTA. But what about those web users that already have an account? So we discussed in the backlog refinement, okay, should we change the copy? Should we switch the order of the buttons? Should we change the colors? Should we call it get started and already have an account? Should we call it I'm new here and log in? So many combinations. We asked ourselves, can we remote test this? And yes, we could. It took my designer back then maybe 10 minutes to create just all the combinations and all the options of what we had discussed. She uploaded it into usertesting.com. That is our remote testing tool. The users on the tool picked it up super quickly because it was just a 5 seconds test. So 5 seconds test means we show a screen to users for 5 seconds. Then they have to answer one question. For us, the question was, hey, if you already have an account, what do you tap? And, it was super clear winner. What we wanted to build. So really from discussing the user problem the first time to actually having learned in certainty about what we want to build, it was possibly less than 45 minutes. And if it's so fast and so easy to test ideas, then we really have no excuse anymore to not do it. Now, if you download the app today, what you will actually see is that our welcome screen does not look like this. And that's because of the very famous intention action gap. So what people say in laboratory environments may not be what they actually end up doing in the end once they are in a real life environment. Great example, 227 users signed up for this event today. How many are actually watching now? That's the intention action gap. Now, how can you then, test something without the intention action gap? That is when you have to actually test in production. And that is when fake door testing comes in for us. There are 2 great tools that we use quite often to do fake door testing. The first one being CRM. Fake door testing sometimes sounds a bit scary because you're experimenting with users. Plus, oftentimes you still have to talk with, have developers work on something. But I promise you, all the tests that we did here, we didn't write a single line of code. And this is something that you can definitely achieve too. The first example I want to talk about is in-app messages, so testing through CRM. If you work on an app, you remember when iOS 14 was released. In iOS 14, the big change was that you could not just track a user's device ID anymore, but this is really important for advertisement, for paid acquisition. Paid acquisition for us, especially on social, is a very important growth factor for us. So for us, it was important to reach really good opt-in rates to this tracking. But now, we couldn't test this before, just because iOS 14 was not released yet. So what we did was we just faked it with in-app messages. So we already have a tool integrated that we can use. For us, it's Brace. Maybe for you, it's Iterable. If you're working on a website, you already have tools like Hotjar to launch surveys. So there's always cool ways to mimic this stuff. And what we did was then fake it. We tested like pre-permissions pop-ups. These are the same pop-ups, but this is different messaging. Then we also had or we tried to really fake the actual Apple pop-up with this in-app message, which is also a Brace one. And in the end, one version actually won. It was just a very plain Apple pop-up. We also tested it on different locations. For us, the location that won in terms of the user journey was in the very beginning. And once iOS 14 was released, we already knew exactly what to do with this pop-up, where to place it. And in the end, our opt-in rate was double the global average. So it really was worth it to test this beforehand for us. And as I said, not a single line of code was written for this test. Now, the last one maybe sounds a bit like the big league. You always ask us, how can we test this with our server-driven UI? Now, the problem that I want to go back to now is the one with the users that skip the onboarding. I mentioned it before, where we looked at the data and saw that they're exploring a lot, but we see they still don't open our content and they do not start the trial. Now we started talking about hypotheses, maybe they're just busy, maybe they just, want to read later. Maybe, the content that we show them is not relevant. For example, if you are a free user, so you have not started the trial yet, you will see what we call the free daily. It's one free Blink. Blink is our content format per day. It's randomly selected, pre-selected, but that means it's also not personalized. Maybe it's too random for you. Especially we cannot personalize because users skip the onboarding, so we don't know yet what they want. Now, we had the idea of maybe if we let them choose their first free daily, maybe that would really excite them. They can choose whatever is really relevant for them and start reading and, be excited and start the trial. Now, what we did was test this with a fake door test. And we have invested in server-driven UI, so we are quite flexible, but you really don't have to do a lot. All this is a headline, a subheadline, and an image. And with just these three elements, we can actually change them without bothering developers from our backend admin tool and, change and test whatever we want. Now, in this particular case, we tested the choose your first free daily hypothesis. The link in the end went to this "we're not quite ready yet" screen. We only tested it with a small amount of users. We only tested the click-through rate. And what we saw was this hypothesis was also not holding true. So in the end, the click-through rates that we actually measured did not surpass the ones from the free daily. The usual free daily click-through rates were already very low. So even if we could convince users with choosing their free daily, it would not make a big dent in our trial opt-in rate in general, which means investing in this feature would not make any sense. Now, what is really important about this, we didn't just test one hypothesis. We tested a bunch of hypotheses. Now, if you look at these these are like 5 features here that we tested. If we had built every one of these features, this would be hundreds of thousands worth of development work, because some of these are also very complex features, especially ones that relate to the free daily. So in the end, really important takeaway. It's so important that you also measure and think about and be proud of all the hypotheses that you discard before a developer ever sees them, because that just saves your company so much money. Now, as with all the tools and practices, there's always pitfalls, and I can assure you every one of these we at Blinkist already fell into and are still struggling with. The first pitfall I want to warn you about is false negatives. So if you are testing something in, for example, through CRM, be sure that you know when to test it, how to test it. For example, it happened to us that we changed something in our CRM flow because we wanted to test the hypothesis through CRM rather than building something in the app. It was an email flow. It didn't work out, but it still didn't feel right to us. And in the end, maybe it was a false negative because we didn't meet our users where they already were, which was the app. So really beware and really calibrate when you use one of these techniques. Not knowing what success means. If you do fake door tests and you measure click-through rates, eventually you will be in the situation where your click-through rate, it's not so bad, but it's also not so good. So if you weren't really sure about what success means beforehand and really didn't define your success criteria, you will not really know what to do with this data. And if you have the ability, as we do, to just throw an image, a headline, and a deep link into the app, it's really tempting to just test a lot, but always make sure to know what success means for you beforehand. And then last part, don't lose track of your vision. So with these kinds of tests, look into the data, checking fake door tests, faking something with CRM messages, you will never be able to discard a whole vision based on that. You may be able to test like steps towards your vision, but really always know what your vision is and what you want to achieve with that vision, because the fake door test will never help you with verifying if your vision is a proper one or not. And super important, always ask, because only if you really ask those questions with every hypothesis, with every idea, every assumption, that's when you really find these really super creative ideas and solutions of how you can really test this tomorrow. It helped us a lot. So everything you can do to make this a habit, train that muscle, if it is a Slack reminder every day, or if you just talk to your team to hold each other accountable with these questions, it's really important that you really make this a habit. So thank you very much. That's already it. I hope it was useful. If you're curious about Blinkist, I have a voucher for you. I think there's 100 vouchers there. So please feel free to screenshot this, follow the link, scan the QR code. You just have to log in or sign up on that website. I'm also open for reaching out. You can find me on LinkedIn. As I said, I'm open to talk about growth and conversion, but also just product leadership, anything that you would like to discuss with me, I'm very open for it. And if there's any questions to the talk, of course, feel free to ask now.
Thank you so much, Eveline, for sharing. Before starting with the question, we have a small poll for all of our spectators. So if you don't mind, I will share my screen. Let me. Yes, okay. Can you see my screen? Okay,
Yes.
Okay. So what we would like to know also for better help question for Eveline, how often are you and your team testing your hypotheses and ideas? You should choose one of question, and please, if you are joining us on Zoom, participate in the poll. If you're joining us from LinkedIn, YouTube, or Twitch, please comment in the chat and we will be able to know the type of answer. And our other question is a multiple choice, and we want to discover what are the biggest challenge preventing you from testing quickly. It could be lack of time and capacity, lack of proper tool, time, size, and structure, or any other situation you are in your company. So please share it with us. Yes, we will give a bit more minute for you to choose, and after Kasia will share with us the findings, and then we will be able to.
Yeah, I've already launched the poll. Can you see the results, Victoria? Elisa?
Yes. Wait. Sorry, I mean. Yes, I can. Yes, I'm not able to see. Okay, let me check better. Okay, yes, I see. Okay, so most of you do test hypotheses and ideas weekly. We have a 55% weekly, 35% monthly, and 9% occasionally. Then the majority has other reason for not for the challenging preventing you for testing. Please share them in the chat. Yes, and also we have Maren from YouTube. He is not regularly, but for each bigger project feature. Okay. So I guess we can stop the poll, and
yeah,
we will start with the question. Okay. Okay, so you can now ask any question, and Eveline, let me know if you prefer to share your screen again, so people who join us can still see the.
Yeah, I can share again, then people can see the.
Thank you.
The voucher. But that means you have to read the questions to me.
Yes, yes, I will, of course. Okay, so let's start with our question from Zoom. So first one is Max. We're struggling a lot in building cohorts to A/B test. How have you solved this issue? How would you start if your current system is not able to create cohort as you need them?
Do you mean like cohort size?
Max, feel free to intervene as you are doesn't do.
Sure, I was able to unmute myself. No, if you really start on the basics, to say let's split in cohorts. So have you started from scratch as you build a system, or have you added these abilities later?
In the very beginning, we used a third-party tool for A/B testing, so everything was automated. In the end, we threw that away, not for the A/B testing tool, but for other reasons. It was basically also our tracking tool. We used Mixpanel. So eventually, we actually built our own A/B testing tool.
Nice, thanks.
Thank you so much. Now we have a question on YouTube from Anna Maria. How do you decide on success metric for validating your hypothesis?
Yeah, usually we have like an overall success metric already for the mission that the team is working on. So for example, if it's activation, you want to know like what does activation mean in your company. If it's conversion rate, then it's maybe a bit easier, like once the user converts to the paid version, that would be success. You always want to have that overall metric, but in the end also, proxy metrics can be very helpful. So for that, you would have to analyze, okay, what is actually the metric that works towards this metric that you actually want to move, and then have a proxy for it. For example, what I mentioned earlier, if we wanted to launch the free daily, that a user can choose, what we wanted to see is their week 1 retention go up. So like once they started the trial and once they like move through the trial, then we want them to come back in their first week and really engage with the content. So that is the metric that we want to move. We decided on that because we know it has a correlation with our North Star metric. It helps with sustainable growth, etc. But then what can actually move into this. One proxy metric, if you want the feature to move it, is that the user even uses the feature. So just feature adoption can already be a success metric for this particular fake door test that you do. Then if you want to define, okay, what is the target? So once you have the metric, which in our case was the click-through rate, it's also that you have to define the target. For that, it's a bit more complicated, but actually you will have to always look into the data and how users perform right now. And what also really helps is always test multiple things against each other. So for example, when we tested this, we tested multiple hypotheses. And what we saw is that some some fake doors got a click-through rate of 9%, others of 24%. That's a huge difference, you know. So it helps already to like remove like kind of like a positional bias, or like people click it because it's on top. But then, you know, like why was 24%, even though that's way bigger than 9%, not big enough? Because we knew what our baseline is. So the baseline of the click-through rate was, you know, like also around 25%. So we didn't see a significant improvement. And in the end, for like what our target was, for that, you know, it would have to be big enough that in the end, you can measure an uplift in our mission metric, which was week 1 retention. And that, you know, is like a funnel you can actually build in a Google Sheet. If you want to see my Google Sheets, I can also share that one day.
Thank you so much, and also thank you to Anna Maria for the question. We will now read a question from Zoom. If you are on Zoom and you want to speak, and please just raise your hand and we can do that. And also, Anna Maria, thanks you for the detailed answer. So now we have Valentin. What tool do you use for reliability analyzing the results? So what tool do you use for analyzing the result? That can be...
Yeah, we have everything in our own databases. So the tool we use for analysis is Periscope, or I think they actually rebranded to Sisense now. What that tool does is basically just visualizing queries that go directly to your own database. This is, to be honest, the only thing I'm trusting right now. We tried other tools before, but, you know, getting like the data pipeline right, getting all the click-through, the tracking right, like there's a lot of room for error in these tools. I want to get this better. I want to have like a proper self-serving tool like Amplitude to work for us. But yeah, right now I only trust like whatever's in our own database.
Yes, thank you. We now have a question from YouTube, from Hardik Tank. How do you validate new features when planned as per user data? Best one to execute of the remaining ones?
So can you repeat?
Yes. How do you validate new features when planned as per the user data? Best one to execute of the remaining ones?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I'm getting the question. Sorry. Can you copy paste it?
Yes, of course. Let me. I think he's asking how do you validate a new feature when you know like you have enough user data and maybe they make you change your plan of. I don't know if you can see it.
I mean, in the end, it's just like analyzing the user data. For example, in the ones that we remote tested, you know, it was like a very clear winner. So we tested each of the variations with 10 users. In our control, we saw that 9 out of 10 users chose the wrong option. In the winning option, it was 9 out of 10 actually chose the correct options. So usually we go wherever the data leads us in terms of user behavior in the remote test, but also in the fake door test, for example, or the CRM tests.
Yes, thank you so much. Now the next question is from Tina here on Zoom. What have been the key enablers for increasing testing velocity? Tools, resources, or anything else you can think about?
I mean, I'm not going to lie, the tools definitely helped, you know. We didn't like think about building these tools for fake door tests. You know, we just had like a use case in mind, and to like really increase our velocity of testing, we immediately built them flexible. For example, if you see our home screen, you know, we can change the order of sections, we can change like the components, we can change the content of the sections. This currently is everything completely flexible, not because we want to do a fake door test, but because we wanted to learn fast what works, you know, and then having to release every time a new app to test something new, that was just not feasible for us. So we just built it with fast learning in mind. And now, you know, we have all these tools. The same with our onboarding. If you go for our onboarding and you see like questions, I can change the question tomorrow without asking a developer. So that was definitely a huge help. But we had these tools and they still were lying around unused until we really started asking ourselves this question. So this is why this habit is so important. You know, like only once we started asking ourselves, how can we test this tomorrow, we got into the creative mindset of, oh yeah, well, this was planned as a subscription screen test, but maybe we can actually test it in the onboarding already, or maybe in the home screen. So really, it was the combination of those two.
Thank you so much for answering. And yes, Tina, please feel free to share.
I don't know, just thank you for the answer. That's really insightful.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll now go on another question from YouTube. Cosmic is asking, what is the hardest part for convincing a team to invest resources to test the hypothesis? Sometimes it's better not even to test at all. How is the balance found between testing and not?
I think testing is always good, but of course you always have to like find the right balance between, you know, like, is it worth it or not? I think it shouldn't be hard to convince your team to test something, especially if the investment is low, you know. But then if you want to get like to more certainty, then maybe you have to invest a bit more. In the end, you will want to find that perfect balance, you know, like if it's high investment and you only gain a little bit of certainty, then maybe, you know, you have to redesign your test, or find like new ways of realizing that test. But yeah, in the end, we want to find that balance. But as I said, like if you go to your team and you want to invest in the test, usually like it should be easy.
Thank you so much. We have another question from Valentin here on Zoom. What tool solution do you use for the server-driven UI test?
Yeah, so for we actually built our own, but yeah, for the server-driven UI, we all built our own. For the CRM test, the in-app messages, we use Brace. With that, you can also already like try like kind of server-driven UI. If you just build like full screen in-app messages, then you kind of can fake server-driven UI. But for the server-driven UI, we built our own. So basically, as every app has, there is like a backend, an admin tool, and I can then go in there and upload my images, my copy, and my deep links. It's all in-house.
Thank you. We have now a question from Christoph from YouTube. He's asking, how do you test hypotheses when you don't have substantial amount of user yet?
Yeah, I mean, in the end, the way we did like our overall Blinkist testing strategy is we started at the top of the funnel, you know, because, you know, if you don't get people in the front, then, you know, you want to test something in the bottom of the funnel, then, you know, it's really hard. So in the end, you really start just optimizing from the top of the funnel. And the more people you get in the beginning, the deeper you can actually go into the funnel. If you don't have those users, no matter what you do, you will have to just remind yourself that there's other ways of testing other than A/B testing with users where you need like the certain cohort sizes, and B, that you're not doing science. You know, A/B testing tool is not, being able to A/B test is really cool, but, you know, like we're not trying to do science here. That's something that I always say. It's supposed to be a tool to steer product decisions. So look at the data, but if you see, like, for example, you see the 10% uplift and it's like consistent every day, you know, then it's already a lower probability that it is like just randomness. Yeah, in the end, it's not perfect, but you have to work with what you have.
That's true. Thank you so much. And Hendrik is following the question with, is it a golden rule to have 10 users for the user testing?
I'm not a user research expert, but we usually go with, usually as much as we can possibly fit into our schedule, but also, like, you know, can recruit. But yeah, we usually go something between 5 and 10. I think for the last interview rounds that we did, we had 8 users, something like that.
Thank you so much. Now we go back to Zoom and we have a question from Nav. how do you manage technical debt?
Oh, it's a long story at Blinkist of how we manage technical debt. I mean, right now we actually have a guideline that when we do planning, we always plan 20% technical debt, 80% everything else. Everything else then, of course, can mean bug fixing, can mean feature development. Can't really tell if this is like working better than other methods. It is what's working best for us right now.
Thank you so much. We also have Hama from Zoom. Do you from your hypothesis before looking at the data? Okay, you do your hypothesis before looking at the data, or you for your hypothesis from the data?
It's called continuous discovery for a reason. You know, like you have a hypothesis, you look at data, that data forms new hypotheses, is a constant going on of hypotheses and verification. It's also with A/B tests, you know, for an A/B test, you always have a hypothesis beforehand, but you know, once the A/B test is a winner, or even if it fails, then you form a new hypothesis why it failed, and then you know, then you try to verify if that it's constantly going on.
Yes, thank you so much. Varsha here on Zoom is also asking, do you also have machine learning models to recommend? If yes, how do you test the improvement in the ML models tomorrow, or ML models in general in part of your product? Yeah,
we do have machine learning, we do have recommenders. Here we are less reliant on app releases because everything is working through an API, so we can actually test just two different API endpoints, you know, both give out different recommenders. So we are not like reliant on that. But of course, you know, there's if you have like two different recommenders, those have to be built first. This is of course very hard because it's also, you know, hard to test not at scale. So I actually gonna be super honest, very hard to do.
Yes, thank you so much. And also, okay, Nav, he's asking, is A/B testing extremely necessary? Why are we so obsessed about it, about considering it only, why are we so obsessed about it, considering it only started with Amazon, but there are online business also successful before Amazon?
Yeah, I would say A/B testing is not always necessary, not absolutely not. I think you have two ways of doing product development. One would be you let your user decide where your product goes. That is A/B testing. The user comes in, you make the button green, you make the button red, and however the user behaves, that's where your product goes. That's A/B testing. But there's another very important one, which is you want to decide your product strategy, whatever you develop in the product, is supposed to influence the behavior of the user. That's a completely different approach, and you will not be able to do that with A/B testing. Think about Apple. They're like the #1 company that really managed to do that, you know, have a product strategy that influenced user behavior. Think about, like, I have an iPhone here, it doesn't have a headphone jack anymore. If Apple would have A/B tested that, we would not walk around with earbuds now, because, you know, of course, if people have the choice between a phone with headphone jack and without, everyone would take the one with headphone jacks because nobody wants to throw away their headphones. But yeah, Apple managed to do that, to actually influence the user behavior. And I think this is something we should take a cue from. Of course, everybody then says Apple has a standing, Apple has a reputation and a brand that people are obsessed with, so it's easier for them. Well, that's a challenge that we have to overcome then.
So thanks, Eveline. Sorry, I just wanted to add something here. So from what I understand, what you say is that basically, if it's kind of an e-commerce thing, which is of course Amazon, I think there's something is this A/B testing is something which is useful, but for Apple or some business where you really make a product like a hardware product, you really need to understand what's something that the user will like, and there's something like A/B testing will not simply help, right?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's like an e-commerce thing versus a hardware thing. I think it's more about a vision versus optimization thing. If you want to if you already found like your big vision, you want to optimize it, A/B testing is your tool. If you really want to, like find product market fit first, you won't A/B test your way to product market fit. You won't A/B test your way to a big vision. So really know like where you want to be at the end of what you're doing.
So do you mean to say that when you do product market fit, after that you don't follow up with A/B testing, or do you do it both ways? So you do product market fit first, and then you continue that with A/B testing?
I would say go for your big vision first, solve a real life user problem. And then if you want to optimize how you do that, then you use A/B testing.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yes, thank you so much for this precious advice. We have another question from Cosmic from YouTube. Are you able to do A/B test in your checkout flow? He also mentioned that he just started this free trial, and it would help to have Google Pay or other payment methods. Any intention of accepting crypto?
Currently, like only in-app purchases are allowed from Google and Apple. This will change soon. We also are planning to move away from just in-app purchases. In the end, more payment methods can be good, can also be distracting. It really depends. This is something that I would actually A/B test. Can also like be worth it looking into what's locally interesting. For example, in Brazil, a lot of people like Boleto, which is basically a QR code that they go to a kiosk, the kiosk scans it, and then you pay in cash. There's a lot of local quirkiness going on in the world. And if you really want to optimize the checkout process, it might make sense to look into it. But then it also depends on how big your market is. So yeah, the answer is it depends.
Thank you. Bastian from Zoom is asking, do you use napkin or back of the envelope calculation before setting up a test in order to verify that the problem you are solving is worth it, given a realistic assumption of by how much the B version will improve a certain metric? Why or why not?
Yeah, for some stuff I don't, just because I have a really good feeling for what the uplift actually will be. And if it's like just the standard model, like, hey, if I change something in the onboarding, if the uplift is big enough, it might be 10%. I already know that's worth it. If it's just, for example, less than a sprint of development work. So that's just experience that I have, and I know and I can build on. Every time we change a flow though and do something bigger, or we think about segments, for example, then definitely I do the napkin calculation. For me, it's Google Sheets. But yeah, I often do that, and it's really helpful. But I mean, it's basically just opportunity sizing, right? Like if you have like a goal and the goal is here, and you make like a little bit of a jump here, is that big enough to bring you here on time? You can only find that with like these calculations. In the end, they're always based on assumptions too, but that's something you'll have to work on. And in the end, you can also test assumptions by looking, for example, at data.
Yes, thank you so much. Now, we have another question on YouTube, and asking, what is your favorite product other than Blinkist?
Good question. It used to be Hipmunk, but Hipmunk doesn't exist anymore. It was like the really best flight search engine. I absolutely loved it. It was so clever. The UI was perfect. It really got you flights that you wouldn't find on other apps. It will forever stay in my heart. It is one of the best flight search engines ever. I only found out they stopped now that I booked flights for the first time after the pandemic. So yeah, that's still top of my mind. Unfortunately, you can't check it out anymore, I guess.
Thank you. And also thank you for the question, everyone is asking. We have another one from here from Zoom. Hamma is asking, as a PM, how much of your time do you spend on testing activity as opposed to Scrum team tester responsible for? Is a PM not supposed to focus more on discovering activities?
Yeah, I know that's not necessarily realistic to do 100% discovery, but we actually have in our team a setup where we want to have the delivery process as smooth and as working as possible. So this is why we have, for example, 2-week release cycles in our apps. I know like in web, you will probably have continuous delivery. You want this to be like as smooth as possible. There was a time at Blinkist, I remember it like 2017, 2018, we were talking about releases all the time because it was just not working. So, you know, like we did a big cut, big process change. It didn't even matter what change, we just knew we had to change something. And now we're in this process where it's like really smooth. We also have engineering managers that help the developers in their development. So we really want the product manager to really focus on the discovery project and not just like in the strategic objective they're working on now. This is something that we're thinking on for next year. How can they also think about Horizon 2, Horizon 3, because that's where their time and expertise is needed way more than on running a Scrum process that in an ideal case should just run itself.
Thank you so much. We still have a Cosmic from YouTube. He's asking, what PSP are you using to process payment? Are you applying machine learning on the checkout for credit card routing, for example? Also, are you able to test or change your current subscription logic? Meaning, if the first next payment attempts fail, do you retry again after X hours?
That is all handled by Apple and Google in the apps for us. And in the web, it's all handled by our payment provider on web, which is a mixture of Recurly and Stripe. We don't do that. Our core competency is book summaries, you know, and, you know, letting users find, you know, the cool key ideas that will, you know, inspire them in their life. That's our core competency. We hand all the payment stuff over to third parties.
Yes, thank you so much. We still have some time for some questions, so please don't be shy and share them. Yes, thank you, Saloni. Okay, how do you incorporate user feedback in your continuous discovery process?
We have a lot of sources for user feedback. So on the one hand, it's the prompted feedback. So we have a survey in the app that goes out in the user's first session already, where the user can give feedback. Then we have an NPS survey, which we send out at different stages of the user life cycle. So after 30 days, after 6 months, after 1 year. Of course, there's App Store reviews. These are also prompted within the app. So we have a lot of like prompted input. For that, we actually have a freelancer that's summarizing all of that into themes and also often actionable advice. So this is like a monthly report we get, and we always have that on top of our mind. And of course, there's like the more formal research that we do. We actually are very lucky. We have a UX research team that is also continuously doing research work for us, oftentimes also just like really fundamental one, which is helpful, but also like just on the day-to-day. We almost often have like smaller research projects going on. For example, now we're calling it trial user interviews, where we just try to recruit users from each of our segments. The skippers that skip onboarding are one of these segments. You know, we try to find out, okay, what actually brought you to start the trial, what brought you to cancel the trial. Then there's also customer service. There we have to like bridge a gap still. You know, like customer service feedback is so important because that is unprompted. So it was important for a user to just write an email to customer service without, you know, like any prompt. So they are collecting everything in a sheet, but we're now working on actually consolidating this with also the customer feedback report that we get from our freelancer. But yeah, we have like a lot of things going on that are like helping us to really hear the user voice.
Yes, thank you.
And in the end, it's all like informing like our hypotheses. So for example, like when I say, can we see this in the data might as well be a customer feedback report.
Thank you so much. I have a question from Zoom from Varsha. When is your journey of Blinkist? Did you decide to outsource all the non-core competencies to the third party and keep the company lean and focus on what it does best? Or was it there from the beginning due to the resources constraint or a deliberate choice?
It's actually a very big mix. So I think we're actually like not good enough at outsourcing. If we think about, for example, we have our own A/B testing tool, you know, like why did we build that? There's hundreds of tools out there. I mean, in the end, we built it because, you know, we weren't happy with the solutions, or the solutions didn't work with our data setup. So in the end, it was just, okay, it's easier if we just do it ourselves and then we have full control. Of course, then, you know, if you want certain features, you will always like have to build another feature on top. But there, you know, like just from our experience, it was worth it to invest. But yeah, for the others, it was it wasn't there. It wasn't from the beginning. Payment, yes, for sure, but not everything was always outsourced. But yeah, in the end, I think now we're on the, you know, if it's a spectrum, we're now definitely leaning towards outsourcing.
Much for the question and also for the response. We had another question from Tina here on Zoom. Do you use any fundamental difference or challenge in testing in different platforms, webs versus app?
Yeah, we actually always do tests based on the platform, because we also see different behavior. So we actually had like some research going on into the differences between Android and iOS users, and there was like interesting insights coming out of it. So we always saw that, you know, if we A/B test something, you know, an Android user might behave differently from an iOS user. On web, it's even different because the platform is so different. And yeah, so this is why we always separate our tests. In the end, we try to keep, you know, like our two apps kind of in sync. But yeah, every now and then you will find things that aren't just working. I mean, Android users, something that's like very common in the industry is that they have like a lower purchasing willingness. That, of course, one big reason for the big gap that you see is Android phones are just cheaper. So, you know, like iOS owners or iPhone owners are already self-selected for a potentially higher income, which of course makes it easier to spend money on a product like a subscription. But even like if we control for that, so if we control for a device price, we still see Android users purchase less. That is because Android users are just used to have like more stuff for free. You know, it's like a very open platform, so it's just easier for them to find things that are not paid. So, but then also the like other really interesting differences. So Android users really valued that they have control over their operating system, over their settings. So really interesting differences between those users. So yeah, we always keep all the tests differently and evaluate them separately.
Thank you so much, and also thank you, Tina, for the question, and thank you, Eveline, for sharing. Cosmic on YouTube is asking, in general, do Blinkist users use more in-app or web application?
Yeah, definitely in-app. So our web application is very like basic. Definitely, like when we built Blinkist in the very beginning, you know, years ago, one of the number one use cases we thought about was the commute. You know, like the people are on the go, they have like 15 minutes on the S-Bahn or the U-Bahn, you know, like we want them to listen to Blinkist and, you know, in these 15 minutes get really something valuable out of it. Of course, since the pandemic, the commute is maybe not the strongest use case anymore, although it is coming back. But because of that legacy, definitely our product is the app. So, you know, like our main product is really the app. So that is also reflected in the usage. But that doesn't mean that the web cannot become a real product, because that would also maybe, you know, allow us to tap into like new use cases, you know, in new moments. You know, maybe it's the coffee break when the user is like on their laptop during work. Maybe videos really is really like interesting for a desktop. So it's not out of the question that it ever will become a proper product, our website. But yeah, for now it's the app.
Thank you so much, and also thank you, Cosmic, for the question. And he also is asking, what is broader tech stack used for apps, web, backend, or database?
What tech stack?
What is broader tech stack use? I guess this is more a question for your
yeah, I would have to ask like
developers.
our engineering managers, but it's probably the apps.
Thank you. And also thank you for the question. We have now Bastian here on Zoom asking, after how many tries do you give up on an idea or vision? Do you just just a rule of thumb like 10 failed tests? If not, what makes you stop working on an idea about you and your team believe in?
Yeah, it's always the question, like, was your hypothesis not correct, or was the solution to your hypothesis not correct? I think what helps make that decision is, always know what you are testing. So when you test, for example, the choose your free daily, like there's barely another solution than, having an entry point somewhere in the app that users have to click first. In that case, we definitely tested the hypothesis. So for that outcome that we wanted to, like get users to read this one app and be convinced, it's not working. But that doesn't mean that, it might not work in the future when we change our strategy from less impulse purchases, more like activating basic users. Then maybe there's a different solution we can think of, because it's then every day you would choose the free daily. So I always know what you are testing. In this case, the hypothesis for the outcome you want to create it did not work out. But in other cases, maybe you're testing a solution. For example, I mentioned earlier, we tested something in CRM. So we tested, let's say, like something like a challenge, like start your 7-day challenge, after 7 days, you will be an expert on financing or Bitcoin, like what we did was test this on in CRM. But what we tested here is a solution, not a hypothesis. So you will always have to know like what you are testing there. And to answer like your question, when are we done with our tries? Once we know once we can discard the hypothesis, I would say. As long as it's the solution you're testing, I would keep testing. As long as the opportunity is big enough.
Yes, thank you so much, and also thank you for the question. We have a few more minutes. I will. There's still a question from YouTube from Vanessa. She's asking, how do you decide which book should be the daily free blink?
Well, I am very sad to report it's mostly random. So out of all of our titles, we have like a very simple algorithm that picks like one random English title. It's not super random. We also wanted them to be like new. So it's like looking back at releases of the last 30 days. But every now and then we have our curation team also pick something. So if it's World Women's Day, you will likely find a free daily that is relevant to that event. Or if something's like Black Friday is coming, like then maybe you'll find something about consumerism. So it's mostly random, but every now and then you will find curation in there too.
Thank you so much. And last question from YouTube. Cosmic, a really interesting person in Blinkist, is asking why the trial only 7 days and not 1 month, for example. And he also asks where the majority of users are from, Germany or the US. Yeah,
so the last one is easy to answer. Our biggest market is the US, with Germany a close second. In general, the classic English-speaking markets, the UK, Australia, Canada, South Africa are also very big for us. But then, of course, you have the Eurozone. We're not doing so great yet, are the emerging markets. But yeah, the biggest number one is the US. Now towards the 7-day trial, well, the answer is we tested others before. We know that the trial is quite short, especially if you think about the transaction you're making here. So you get a 7-day trial, but then it auto-renews immediately to a year. That's also like quite long. We are aware of that. We get a lot of feedback about people that, find the 7 days too short. I mean, it's also very relatable, like we're all busy, especially like the users that have like this urge to learn a lot, like oftentimes we refer to some of our core users as career optimizers. Of course, career optimizers are busy. Then, like maybe they didn't have the time to really try it. We believe that we can still turn it around by helping them to integrate it into their lives earlier. I mean, these career optimizers, they also have habits, they go running, they have a workout routine. Maybe they have commutes, like if we just help them to integrate it into their routines, then 7 days should actually be enough to evaluate if Blinkist is good enough or not. But then there's also like the marketing and optimization point. If it would be 14 days, if it would be 30 days, if you then want to evaluate if a marketing campaign is successful, you will only really know this for sure if you don't have extremely good prediction going on, if it was successful after 30 days. And that is just way too long for us because, like we are all about reducing time to learning. So if you really want to know if a test is successful, 7 days is the best for us.
Thank you so much. And also, Cosmic, thanks you a lot for answering all these questions. We now will move on the last few questions on Zoom. Varsha is asking, with the new privacy issue, how do you work on the challenge of user identities these days?
You mean like with the IDFA changes? Yeah, I mean, right, for us, like it's really a problem with like our marketing, like we have like, you cannot really track users anymore. So it's harder to really evaluate if a campaign was successful. The good thing is everyone has the same problem. So, like we're all competing for the same space in advertisement. So for that, like it's just like a new normal that we have to basically get used to. For like everything that happens in the app in terms of recommendations, etc., that is all data that the users themselves give us in the app through the onboarding. So we're not using anything from the outside. So even if they, like, I don't know, are interested in psychology on Facebook, we don't know that, we don't use that. We want the user to volunteer that information. And in the end, it also improves their experience. So those users that go through the onboarding do that voluntarily.
Thank you so much. Now we are a bit late, so this is the last question we will ask. But if you still have a question, you can reach directly to Eveline. She shares with LinkedIn, or you can reach through as product people, and we will share your question with Eveline. We're more than happy to do that. So our last question is from Hama. Why do you think you're not doing well in the emerging market?
Oh, great question. If you're thinking about the big emerging markets, I would think of Brazil and India. And I think in both of these markets, localization is super important. In Brazil, it's more the language. So, like if we ever add another language, maybe it is Portuguese, just to tap into Brazil. If we think about India, it's a lot about the price too. We already have localized pricing. So in India, while in Germany, you would pay 80 euros for the yearly subscription, in India, you only pay 30 or 40 euros. There's like, we did do like a little platform discrimination there. So iOS is 10 euros more expensive because on Android, you currently have less features than on iOS. So it's a bit cheaper on Android. But, like if you are, like an ambitious young person in India, and if you can afford 30 euros a year, you maybe also be able to afford 80 euros a year. So it doesn't really, our current localized pricing doesn't really make so much of a difference. If you really want to like reach the masses in India, you would probably have to have like something that is way less commitment. 1 year is a big commitment, so maybe you should push monthly. You would need way cheaper prices. We're talking about maybe 1 or 2 euros per month, not 30 euros a year. You would need local authors. There's a huge book scene in India, especially for career optimizers that I talked about earlier. You would have to get all of these authors and titles in to really make a dent with like this young business community in India. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons. I would say for each emerging market, it might be a different one. But yeah, we are very aware of though.
Thank you so much. And also thank you all for joining us today. Don't forget, next week, you can still find us here with another speaker talking about product management topic. But first of all, thank you, Eveline, for being here with us. Even if we go a bit out of time, it was really amazing. And we had a wonderful question and your responses were really on top. And also big thanks goes to all of you, our community. Without you, we will be nothing. So thank you so much for participating so actively today with us.
Thank you all. This is fun.